What's going on, beautiful people? This is Bernard Hamilton, and you're listening to Resilient Life Communications. Tonight, I'm going to share with you two questions that was asked of me regarding the various things that I do related to mindset and faith. First question came from Miss Curious. She says, "You're always talking about mindset and faith." And then she says, why? The other question she asked was, do you really practice this stuff for yourself? Well, for the first one, I'm always talking about mindset because when I was in ministry, one of the things that I discovered was no matter how much I preached, no matter how much I taught, no matter how much I broke down the Hebrew or the Greek or preached in expository preaching style the way I was taught, and did the homiletics and did the conclusion, and here's what you need to, the application, that very little change took place in people's lives. And that's primarily because you discover that most people do not change. They stay the same. They gain the knowledge consciously of what they're supposed to do, but they don't take the time to actually change the way they think. And because of that, their actions never change. And that's why if you go to a lot of churches, you'll find out there's some of the meanest people I've ever met. I've met them in church. And before I left West Virginia to move to Texas, it's like, man, I didn't have a care in the world. I mean, God had blessed me with a nice job. And many people have heard that story before. So my life was very easy. I was a laid back, easygoing type of guy. So to go into that environment where you have people that can quote the scriptures from Genesis to Revelation, and they can tell you about all the other books that weren't in the Bible, the pseudepigrapha and the various other pieces of the Bible pieces that aren't in there. It just amazes you that people really don't learn how that works as far as mindset and faith works, and they study it. They acknowledge it, but the people that I met in seminary, a lot of them studied from an academic standpoint. The Bible was like academics, but you didn't actually see it practiced as far as their behavior and the habits. The second thing Ms. Curious asked was, do you really practice this stuff? Well, I had no choice when I went to seminary and I ran out of money, and I'm down there, as is the case with a number of people who are in seminary. What happens is that you get in seminary and you're trusting God for this and you're trusting God for that. But if you don't have money to live off of, what are you going to do? I mean, if you don't have a job and you're barely making it and you're just waiting for somebody to give you something, which is not the way that it's supposed to work, you have to come up with something. So for me, I was forced to actually practice faith for the first time. I knew faith in theory, which is the case with most people. I knew it, but I didn't practice it. So when I was forced to practice faith, and the way that I did it was I actually started trusting and believing that God had already given me what I needed even before I got it. So, and that comes through what's known as the law of assumption. When I learned those principles and I began to see the end before anything happened, I saw me having the money. I visualized me having the money to do whatever I needed to do. I visualized me working for somebody. God began to show those things. God began to allow those things to be attracted into my life. And it's like, it's nothing that you really study. It's just, it's like one of those aha moments to where you're saying like, wow, for real? And so from that, again, like I've said before, when you're in a situation where you have no money and you're going to lose your apartment, you're going to lose your car, you have no job, and to see how God put that together in within a week, everything I needed was there because of my actions and the practice that I picked up, that no matter what happened after that, I really didn't care what I was learning knowledge-wise in the scriptures. I knew what happened to me in practice, and I began to practice that from that point on. And we're talking about well over close to 40 years ago. I've been doing that ever since, and everywhere I've gone, God has provided for me. I've never really been afraid of that. I've always been able to be easy, not focus on negative stuff, focus on the fact that God is good to me, that God always provides for me, and he supplies for my every need. When I start focusing on that, like that, magical things begin to happen. And so, yes, do I practice it? Of course. Do I practice it religiously? I practice it religiously now. I didn't do it back then. I mean, what happens is when you get comfortable, sometimes you stray away from what brought you there. And that's what happened to me. But when it comes to what she said is, you're always talking about mindset. The reason I talk about it is because so few people actually put it to practice. The ones who've actually transformed their minds, which makes up about 3 to 5% of the population, those are the people who rule the world. The rest of the people are people who know what to do, but they don't practice what to do. And that's what frustrates counselors, life coaches, pastors, therapists. They tell them what to do, and they continue to make the same mistakes. And that's why when you look at Alcoholics Anonymous, I mean, they have a blueprint on if you just follow these steps and acknowledge this. I mean, you're just acknowledge I'm helpless, but I'm going to do this, or I'll do is one day at a time. And you begin to think the way that you're supposed to think, and then to realize that only 8 to 10% of the people in that program actually are successful in staying away from alcohol. It's primarily because the mindset doesn't change. You can't white knuckle your way. You can't white knuckle your way to success. It always comes down to, if you take imagination versus willpower, imagination is going to win every time. And so when it comes to faith, and you understand faith is not based on if God blesses me, I'll be happy. No, it's the reverse. If you're asking God, if you ask for God for something in prayer, believing that you already have it, God is saying, you are actually saying that you're going to believe that you already have it even before you get it. So when you deal with faith and prayer, you're actually dealing with what's known as the law of assumption. You're assuming the feeling of the prayer already fulfilled in the future, even though you haven't got there yet. And what happens is when you impress those particular beliefs and vision and imagination from the conscious to the subconscious, what begins to happen is that whole thinking and that whole vision comes to fruition, because the subconscious, one with God, is then from that point expanding that particular assumption into your current present situation, into where it actually visualizes into reality. Now, this is something that is extremely difficult for people whose mindset haven't changed can understand. You can't comprehend it. You can't comprehend it. And that's why 85, 90, 95% of the people in the world cannot understand faith, because they don't practice faith. Now, if you see some of the people, some of the pastors, some of the leaders, some of the life coaches, if you listen to them, if you even read some of the books where they're talking about no excuse, you have no more excuse, go out there and grind, work. They know that it's not going to happen for the most part. They know that they're only looking at a 5% out of 100% window. And it's something that could be avoided when you deal with some of the people that are dealing with the various issues that they're dealing with. And so those are the two questions that we had for the night. Now, say, for instance, you're somebody that says, I want to make some money. And you walk around saying stuff like, well, I'm broke, and how can I have money and I'm broke? And then you understand what scriptures say, where it says in Proverbs 23:7, as a man or woman thinks in their heart, so are they. It's like, then you begin to understand that if you're constantly, consciously impressing on your subconscious that you're broke, and I don't have this, and there's no way out, what happens is the expression that comes out of that is lack. You say you're broke, you're broke. If you speak that type of negativism into your life, that's what you create for yourself, because each person creates their lives. Whether you know it or not, you're creating your own life. You're creating your own situation. And so what you have to do, well, I've got these bills. Well, what you have to do is, instead of focusing on the bills, you've got to focus on the good things that are in your life. You got to focus on the fact that you do have a place to stay, or you do have a car. And if you don't have a car, if you don't have this, you at least can be thankful and grateful that you have health. You have your two eyes. You have people around you who love you. You begin to focus on things in which you can, so where you can generate abundance and prosperity, because on the inside you're prosperous, you're abundant. And God's plan for you is that you should be prosperous. Jesus says, I came that you might have life and have it more abundantly. These are things that you can have in your life if you learn to practice these little principles, that just this little shift can send you on a completely different path if you just focus on not only what you're grateful for, but when it comes to your prayers that you've asked, you have to believe that God already said yes in the assumption of the prayer fulfilled, and God will answer that prayer in the future. But you have to go to the future. You have to believe that you already have what you prayed for in the future. Visualize what it looks like and feels like. And what happens over time is you actually are able to manifest through the God in you, as I always call it. Some people say source, in infinite intelligence, infinite intelligence. I get it out. And then you have some people who say, well, we're God. So either way, it's all source energy. It all comes from God in order for that to manifest. Now, if you, well, how long, he's like, I'm gonna lose this or I'm gonna lose that. Well, first of all, whatever you're going to lose is for a reason, and for that fact, what you want to do wherever it is, you thank God that you don't have that headache anymore. But in the meantime, what you want to do is you want to constantly look at what's going right in your life, constantly giving praise and thanks to God for the good things that are in your life. And by doing that, you still got bills, but you press that stuff down until you're able to pay those bills. Not saying that you want to acknowledge, or you want to disregard them or disrespect them. I would actually call the people. If I'm ever in a situation like that back in the day, you call the people, tell them this is the situation. They'll come back and say, well, can't you work for McDonald's? At that time, that's when you hang up on them. But you say, well, I hear what you're saying. My plan is to do this, 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 and this. And you move on from there. And once you get off the phone, you want to thank God that he still provides for you, that you got food on the table. You're constantly giving thanks and honor and glory to God. And as you pray and you're asking for various things, you ask and pray, trusting and believing that those things have already been taken care of, even though they haven't manifested materially in your life. You go to the future and you imagine that I forgot them. And you ask yourself, what does it feel like to have $50,000 to do what I need to do? What does it feel like to have $100,000? What it feels like to have $500,000? You begin to think like that. What happens is that you, without you even knowing it, by you impressing your conscious imagination and your thoughts onto your subconscious mind, which is aligned with the God in you, the Holy Spirit, some people say the universe. If that's what you've got going on for you, what happens is it is the God in you, or source energy, that actually manifests the outer reality that you're looking for. And when that happens, it is a beautiful thing that can blow your mind. My wife and I have experienced that in a lot of different ways, when it comes to houses, when it comes to rental properties, when it comes to transportation, buying property. We've experienced that, and it is a mind-blowing experience that that someone greater than yourself has manifested the dreams that you have imagined over a period of time. It'll blow your mind. But to answer your question, to everything that you said, you're always talking about faith and mindset, and why do you do that? I do that because that's the goal. The goal is that there are billions of people who do not know how to live by faith. They don't, because they haven't changed their mindset. Therefore, they can't see it. Most people in the world are blind, spiritually blind. They cannot see that there's issues in their lives, and that it's almost like being an avatar or being in the Matrix. Your body is not who you are. You live in a body that you only have for temporary. You are a spirit being. You are a divine being. You were never created, and you will never die. You were created in the image of God through his essence, And it's like but it came from an essence that was never created, which blows your mind. So I'm not going to go any deeper than that, because that will really blow your mind if I do. But and then the other thing is, do you really practice this? I practice this stuff, and my wife practices it, and that's why we can give you visions and give you goals of what we're going to be doing in the future. And you'll hear more about what we're going to be doing both in real estate, as entrepreneurs, as business people, in a lot of different ways as they begin to unfold. And so if you're somebody that has goals and dreams, just let me just say, hold them to yourself. Don't tell your mama, don't tell anybody around you. In some cases, don't even tell your wife or your husband or your significant other, because they will try to shoot you down. Your vision that you have came from God, and that's the only vision that, if you've got that vision from God, then all you have to do is just go out there and do what you need to do. Other people won't understand it, that's fine. At least you understand it, and that's all that matters. So that's our podcast for tonight. Thank you for joining me on the Resilient Life Communication. Look forward to hearing from you later. As always, guys, walk with the King and be a blessing. Peace.